Okay, so we're going to do another whiteboard session. I wanted to do a bit of a series actually. We're going to be focusing on network rollout, where GIS, where systems like ours come into this, when supporting network rollout for fiber to the X. I mean, fiber to the premise is obviously very important, but fiber to the enterprise, fiber to the business, those things are similar to this. In this first session, we're just going to keep it high level. I'm just going to go over the main sort of themes and work streams that happen during a network rollout for companies like ours in terms of helping, GIS, physical network inventory, some of the things that we work within. I think it'll be a series because this is going to be a high level session today, and I think each individual one will be maybe a 10-minute session by itself. But I just want to go through what are the processes in this first session, and what are some of the things that we're actually trying to do when we're in that phase. So I'm going to take a different color, and let's talk about the first phase of network rollout and where we come in and where we help. The first thing that typically happens is HLP. Now, this is high level planning, right? So the question that we're trying to answer during this phase here is where? Where should I build out a network as a customer, as a company, right? And the questions that we're trying to answer here is we're trying to maximize return on investment effectively based on several things. Customer base. Where are my customers at the moment? Demographics maybe. So where are customers? Where are other people like my customers? Because I know that I can sell to them at the moment. Where is there underutilized areas, or where are there gaps in the network where we're maybe not going to come across so much competition? And there's lots of different factors that we look at here. This can keep coming down. Lots of different factors. And what we typically do is work with companies to try and figure this out through geospatial analytics, through other analytical means, take-up rates, customer connections, and all of that will come in. And actually what it'll do, normally you'll have like a map or an area segmentation down here. This is sort of an output of it. And we get a status, right? We get a graded score for these where we have some areas that look okay. Let's just color them in blue. These ones look fine. Red, we get some areas which are bad. Maybe a certain geography there. And then maybe we get some areas that are green, right? Good. These are good areas to look at. And this is what we're trying to find in this first stage. What is an area that looks attractive to us? And these green areas indicate maximum return on investment based on business rules that I want to focus on. They might be cheap to build, but lots of potential, for example. And there is lots of data sets that we can pull in here that helps influence this. And that's worth writing up here, actually, cost of build. All of these factors are typical ones, but there's a lot more that we help people with. But really we're trying to answer, where should I roll out to next? Once we've figured that out, we're going to roll on to the next stage. So I'm just going to draw a little dashed line here. The next stage is also high level. We're still at the high level stage, but it's high level design rather than planning. We move into that design phase, right? And instead of the question where, we already know where we're going to go to next. What we're going to do is what? That's the kind of question that we're trying to answer in this particular phase. What? And if we take one of these regions, let's just take this one, and let's draw it here. What we'll start with is an area, right, that we want to roll out into because it's got great return on investment. Now that area, you might have a central point, like a fiber distribution point, and we might have there lots and lots of houses in that area. That's why it's attractive to us. What we want to do in this first stage is get a first guesstimate, a first estimate at the sizing of cables, what we need to place, what is a bit more meat on the bones from here, especially around cost. What does a rough plan and network actually look like, and what is sort of high level costs associated to that, right? This is the main thing that we're trying to figure out. So you'll get lots of cables here. What's really important from a high-level planning perspective is to understand a few things. We want to kind of understand routes that we're going to go down, so these blue lines, sizing, what size cables do I need? Does this cable coming down this road here, does it need to be a 48 or a 96? Because there's different costs associated to that. Yeah, these are the things that we're trying to look at. We'll also typically in this phase, a lot of people talk about sort of clustering as well. Clustering is just kind of saying these 3 houses have been served from this drop node, these 3 houses have been served from that distribution node. We might group these sort of 5 or 6 together. It's important to understand that, so you know, maybe not the final drop to every single premise, but you understand the groupings as well. So you start to get a bit of a feeling for what this network in this region might look like. And that informs 2 things. One is costs. Okay, we thought we had a good idea of how much it's going to cost. Now we've gone through this process, we have a better idea of that. We might have a first sort of bill of materials or a bill of quantities at least that we can look at. And the second thing that's really important in this phase is setting up field work. Setting up field work. Because that's our next phase actually, and this is really important. This next phase, and before going on to low-level design, let's just quickly do field survey. And here we're starting already to ask the most important question through this, which is how. And how is going to be a question that also carries on in the next phases as well. But what we're doing here is we're taking the high-level design and we're surveying it. We're inspecting it, providing feedback. So, typical things here. Capacity, routes, infrastructure, infra. These are typical things that you want to kind of survey, inspect, provide feedback on. You might be looking to borrow existing infrastructure, right? So what is the capacity on that? You need to go and do, let's just take the UK market as an example where you might be borrowing PIA, same concept in other countries as well. Can I actually use that infrastructure to place my cables, or is it full? I need to go out and survey that. The routes, we want to go down certain roads. Does that make sense? Or are there big, massive oak trees that we're not going to be able to dig up down that road and we need to go down the other side of the road? Infrastructure, can we leverage poles? Can we leverage underground assets? Can we place manholes in locations that we're planning when there are things like bus stops and street furniture, etc. in the real world? And you want to capture all of that. And normally the way that we capture that is through sort of field notes. So we would take this data here, we'd pass it across into the field survey team, and they would create field notes on that. And then what we need to do is, based on those field notes, we go to the next stage, which is low-level design. I'm going to run out of room here. Low-level design. And this is just an extension of how. And the main job of low-level design is twofold. Number one, update the high-level design with field notes. So what we need to do here is take the combination of these two things, what we started with, what we changed in the field, and update it so we've got this. The other thing that we need to start considering is connectivity. So this is splicing This is port allocation, in particular, these two topics. So we've got kind of all of the features and the routes here. Now we need to make sure that we've got a network that at a high level makes sense and is connectable, right? And that needs to be done through this low level design. And the main thing that we're trying to aim towards here is not just costs and bill of quantities and setting up the field work. I'll put this in its own little kind of box down here in terms of the main note at the bottom. What we're doing is we're creating a buildable network. That's the output of this low-level design stage, right? So by the end of this work, it should kind of have something that's buildable. Okay. Then finally, well, not finally, two more sections actually. Let me put another thing in here just for spacing more than anything else. So I'll be good. This next one, permitting / building. So this is, so far, and this is really important, so far this has been a very involved process from the GIS team, from the physical network inventory team, been very active. We're now going to go into a passive, more supporting role for a little bit. We're going to help this team here. We've answered these questions, it's now up to them. They need to go out there and do some building work. They need to take this, which has been updated, and they need to go and build it. But the supporting roles that we need to provide is getting permitting. So 1, getting permitting, and 2, creating job packs for build. Now, so this is really about sort of providing data and reports to the correct teams. So permitting, you'll probably need to give the local governing body some data to say these are the streets that you're going to be digging up, this is the work that you're going to be doing, can I do that or not? Job packs, this is giving out to the construction teams, this is reports like splice sheets and bill of materials, etc. So that they can actually go out, take the correct assets, the correct hardware out into the field to build the thing in the first place, and then also how they're going to connect it all together. Permitting is really important. What we found as a company, standardize both the job packs and the permitting, the way that those reports are generated, and you will get rid of the most commonly talked about issue in build out, which is permits, which is slow. What we found helps the most is if you can just set this into sort of a typical standard work packet that you create, where you just for an area click a button and it generates all the reports. Then you standardize the outputs, and more often than not you give the local governing body all the documents they need. So spend time up front configuring all the documents they need. Have a system whereby you can click and run a standard report. It will speed up this process tremendously. Other job packs, this is different depending on the teams that you're sharing the data with, but the same thing applies. The final thing is we need here set up field work. We need to also give this build team access to report back on what they've done. Report what was built. This is quite often overlooked, but it's really important, especially for the next phase. If you don't streamline that, then you can cause issues down the line. So what is the output of this? Well, we've got a built network, which is very exciting. That's what we're all aiming towards. And also we've got some more field notes. And these field notes are on what was actually built, what were changes, because we've got here a view of what the world should be, but what did they actually build? They need to provide feedback on that. And then finally, and this is not talked about nearly enough, which breaks my heart because I'm a GIS person through and through, as-built record updating. And this is kind of answering the question, we're back involved again, what was done through this process? So what you need to do is you need to take the LLD, which you'll have in your system at the moment, and you need to update it with the build notes. Now this is really important, and you should not consider an area down here complete and built out, in my opinion, until this as-built process has been done. Only once all of this has been updated should you come back to here and say, okay, tick, we've done that area, let's move on to the next one. The output here is that we'll have up-to-date built inventory in documentation system. Now the reason that I stress this time and time again is people quite often ignore this stage, and what that means is that in your documentation system, which is what you're using to answer these types of questions, turn up customer, fault management, capacity planning. How are you going to answer these questions as a business if instead of using an up-to-date inventory on what was actually built, you haven't done this process and you're using this data back here, which is a good guess of what was built in the network, but you've not updated it? How are you going to actually answer these questions accurately in next year, 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line? A lot of companies are rushing as quickly through this phase, these first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 phases. They're not focusing effort on this because it's sort of seen as a cost at the moment. But in the next years, as we move into generating revenue, as we move into having to actually turn up customers and manage their networks, if you've not done this, you're going to see much greater costs down the line when you can't answer these questions very well, and you have to go back in and somehow try to clean up this data by sending people out into the field to do surveying and inspecting. So do it all the time whilst going through, otherwise you're going to have serious issues there. Okay, and then very quickly, I just want to leave with a couple of final thoughts, and then I'll stop here for now. This is just a high-level session. We're going to do a session on each of these in more detail, I think, as a bit of a series. But generally speaking, from a GIS perspective, what we want to do is we want to maximize this part here. Because if we maximize this here, we make the revenue, return on investment go up, which as a business only helps us. We want to make sure that we refine this model all the time, to make sure that the areas we're building into are as good as possible. And part of the thing that feeds into that is this process actually over time will get refined and better. What we're aiming to do is get here to this build bit, at the end of this stage here, going into the build, we want to get that to 100%. And what I mean by 100% is that this is built, when they go out and build it, they changed nothing. It was designed exactly as it was built. Now, we're not ever really going to get there, but we want to get as close to that as possible, right? So that there's no changes here, there's less work that needs to be done here as well. And typically through high-level design, we'll maybe get that to sort of 40% ready. Through field surveying, we'll take and LLD, we'll take that up to probably somewhere around 80%, right? Which is okay, because we know that 20% difference, we can account for that in these outputs, so the bill of materials, etc. You can account for 20% difference, so you always take out enough materials to actually build it. But the more that this refines over time, and the more this number grows to 90%, the more confidence we can have in understanding the costs of this, which only comes back to here and refines this model, which helps us maximize return on investment. So it's a living organic system that we want to keep evolving over time and keep working on as well. So we shouldn't just put it in place and then forget about it. This should be continually evolving. Where are there little bits that we can streamline? And when we go through each of these sections in more detail, I want to talk about, where 3GIS, where we've seen where we've added little bits that have streamlined a process that make a big difference, because these are all independable on each other. If you're updating just field survey, you don't just see the benefits there. if we can get through field survey, not just benefits in terms of time and effort, if that gets this number higher, that means building and permitting is easier, and it means the as-built comes down in effort. Because if this is 90%, we're now only updating 10% of the records. If it was 80, we're updating 20% of the records, right? So it's all interconnected with one another, and changing and streamlining, improving processes in each of these phases has knock-on impacts elsewhere. And it's really in those little things we've found that you can do that make a big difference. Standardizing permit documents, for example, sounds small, makes a real difference to this end-to-end process. It can make the end-to-end process, a few months rather than 6 months, because the permitting bit is probably the slowest bit in the whole process, right? So just some food for thought there. There'll be more to come on this, and I hope that you found this one useful at least. It's something that we're passionate about at 3GIS, helping customers solve. So if you've got any questions, as usual, put them down in the comments, and I'll try and get some answers to those. And yeah, thank you for taking the time to watch. I'll see you soon. Bye.